Hey guys, TrepChains here with a support zMonk guide for patch 2.6.8. In terms of gameplay, it's pretty similar to what's been going on with support monks for quite a long period of time. So in this rift, it's about sticking with your DPS, with your trash killer for most of the rift, and then with your Rift Guardian killer on the boss. Making sure in the packs they have Inner Sanctuary on them, hitting everything with your Crippling Wave Tsunami, which is helping heal through your Epiphany, keeping Epiphany up the entire time. You can use Epiphany to jump and not just run between mobs if you like. Try and stay near your DPS, particularly when you're moving through a rift with your trash clearer, to give them the buffs as much as possible. Spam your mantra of healing. Spam it. Pretty simple. Spam it. Most importantly, when you're in a pack, like what's shown right now. So be spamming the mantra when you're in a pack, at least hitting it occasionally when you're moving between packs. I recommend running Serenity Tranquility, so hitting that every so often, like whenever it's off cooldown is great, but however often you can is fantastic. There are a couple of options with this build, so if you've got Breath of Heaven Zephyr going on, hitting that when it's around about off cooldown shortly afterwards is great in the pack for heals. If you're right next to your main DPS through the rift, it's also giving a bit of a speed boost, which is really handy. Or if you're running the Exploding Palm version of the build, you'll be wearing Ulianas in that case, so you don't actually have to worry about hitting the skill at all. You can just ignore the skill, but you will have it on your bar, so that will make less things to hit, I guess. One of your jobs does involve hitting the pylons, so typically during a rift, never hit a speed. You can typically hit channeling and shield as soon as you see them in most instances. Some groups will be a bit fussy about that. And then on something like a power or a conduit, effectively wait until the group is ready and happy for it to be hit. So don't hit speed ever. Do hit shield and channeling as soon as you see them. The exception may be if you're really close to the boss and they want to save that pylon for the boss. Power and conduit, just wait until everyone's ready, is basically the gist. One of the interesting things with this support monk build now is nothing changes on the boss. So we've had some support monk builds before where your rotation changes a lot on the boss, but not in this current build. So just keep doing what you're doing. Keep your Inner Sanctuary on your Rift Guardian killer at the boss. Keep doing your Crippling Wave. Keep your Epiphany up. Keep spamming your mantra. Keep hitting your Serenity Tranquility. And if you happen to have Breath of Heaven Zephyr on, keep hitting that as well. If you've got Exploding Palm, the flesh is weak, well, you don't need to worry. So that's pretty much the gameplay side of the support monk here for at least patch 2.6.8. I'm gonna swap into town now for a bit of a gear and build check over of what I recommend, and then plus a couple of the variations. Okay, checking out some gear and builds for this support monk in patch 2.6.8. Specifically focused on running with a trash clearer that uses bleed in terms of wearing the Pain Enhancer gem. Typically at this stage I'm talking about a Legacy of Dreams Nova Necromancer or a Mundunugu's Spirit Barrage Witch Doctor. Now I am going to show a couple of build variations here. As always, starting with my preference, and I am talking about here running with a Ground Stomp Barbarian in all versions, but my preference being the no Exploding Palm version. So I'm going to start with that, but I will cover the Exploding Palm version a bit later on. This version is very similar to what a lot of people are running in Season 19, 2.6.7. Effectively running a 4-piece inners by wearing 3 of those pieces. I'm wearing here the helm with dexterity, vitality, life per hit, they're okay. Some all res there or something would be nice. Maybe a life percent. Ideally, vitality, life percent, and all res would be awesome on that. A chest armor with dexterity, vitality, resist all, and health globe bonus. Health globe bonus is still really important for all the support monks out there. Keep that in mind. And gloves with dexterity, vitality, attack speed, and cooldown. Okay, then I'm running on this one Captain Crimson's. So we're taking out the 3-piece set bonus. We are wearing a Rogue. This is pretty well rolled belt, dexterity, vitality, resist all, percent life. And well rolled pants, dexterity, vitality, resist all on those. That's giving us extra cooldown, extra resource cost reduction, and damage taken is reduced by the percentage of resource cost reduction. So you'll see a bunch of resource cost reduction rolled on some of my gear. Then running Borns. So Borns gives us extra cooldown. To be running this, we don't have our old Leoric's Crown, and none of the builds I'm going through are going to have a Leoric's Crown, which is a bit unusual to support. So we're picking up some extra cooldown with Borns here. See here on my shoulders, vitality, resist all, cooldown, resource cost reduction, and importantly, secondary health globes. Very important. And on my sword, this is what I'm considering an ideal statted sword for this version, this Borns. Cooldown, resource cost reduction, bleed, and no secondary CC. We don't want secondary CC on our weapons or other pieces that can roll on braces, for example, because it still can put a little bit of an effect on our Barb's Ground Stomp. That's the primary reason. So I just try and avoid it if at all possible. So if you can't get one that's rolled this well, and I personally don't recommend rolling off the damage just because it can make the item too hard to roll, but if you want to, you can roll off that damage. So this is a Vit and 3 stats. But if you can't get, you know, rolls like this, my next recommendation would be taking out that resource cost reduction first, right? Vitality, cooldown, and bleed with, again, no CC on the secondary. Other options you could have, so this is having those 3 stats but with secondary, so I prefer not to have that. You can see that secondary CC with the knockback. Prefer to avoid it, so I would say definitely the one I'm wearing, even though it's got less resource cost reduction, is better because it doesn't have that secondary CC. Or this one, if you weren't looking for bleed, if you had bleed on your shield, for example, and you're like, okay, so it's not so important on my weapon, you could go with one like this. Cooldown, resource cost reduction, vitality, and no secondary CC. Okay, so they're weapon options there for that Borns weapon there. Okay, so they're my sets. So wearing 3 sets for this version. Because I've had a bit of a chat about bleed, so bleed is working with pain enhancer that's being worn by your trash clearer. If they're wearing it, if your trash clearer is not wearing pain enhancer, you don't have to worry about all this bleed stuff. So your shield can also roll bleed. So this one, as I said, I've got it on the weapon, so I don't have to worry too much. It'd be great if you can get a double bleed roll, that's awesome. But in the meantime, on a storm shield, strength, vit, all res would be better than the armor. Definitely need cooldown. You can also roll resource cost reduction on your shield, but importantly, it's another place where you can get your secondary globes. So I recommend secondary globes on that and cooldown as your most important stats, and then consider other things like resource cost reduction or resist, etc. Okay, other supporting legendaries. Wearing spirit guards on this one, and this is an option. You can switch it around in the cube if you like. So I've got them as dex, fit, armor, life regen, and a secondary resist. Ideally, again, no secondary resist. We'd want a all res roll on those. Importantly, my secondary stat there is maximum at 60% damage reduction. So if you've got one less than that, you're probably better off having the spirit guards in the cube and wearing, say, some Nemesis braces. So Nemesis braces will be one of the things I have in the cube on this build there. So that's my extra pylon, and typically in most versions we're expecting the zMonk to be hitting the pylons in 2.6.8. So keep that in mind. You'll be expected to be wearing Nemesis, either wearing them or in your cube. Illusory boots. So illusory boots are pretty much essential for any zMonk because your job is to stay with your DPS. And it's not as easy for your DPS to move as it often is for you. I say very particularly with the Witch Doctor does not have illusory boots itself. So if it's in the pack and the monk moves out, the monk has to get back onto the DPS to throw the sank under the DPS. So using Force Move with your illusory boots helps you keep your sank on your trash killing DPS. Very important to be wearing. In terms of stats, Dex, Vit, Resist All, Armor's fine, and importantly, secondary health globes. Okay, jewelry. So I'm running Flavor of Time here. Generally a pretty good amulet for support. I'm running it with cooldown and resource cost reduction, and importantly, your jewelry can get secondary globes. You want secondary globes on all your jewelry. I do have a 10% movement speed roll there, so I just need to take that into account when looking at my Paragon. A Oculus ring. So again, important secondary health globes on your Oculus. As close to 85% as possible on your secondary stat. It ranges 70 to 85% normally. And then other survivability stats. So vitality and resistance to all on this is fine. You could also have some resource cost reduction or something there if you liked. And Ring of Royal Grandeur. So again, you would really like some secondary health globes on this. This is a lot harder to roll because it's guaranteed to roll with stats, main stat, attack speed, and life per hit every time. So you need to get one of cooldown or health globe bonus to get a reasonably decent one, plus a socket to be able to roll the other one. So this is well rolled for a Ring of Royal Grandeur, albeit not ancient. So attack speed, life per hit, cooldown, secondary health globes, and the socket on that one. Taking a better look at the cube now. So there's a few options in the cube that I want to quickly talk over. Firstly, the weapon. Often, and it depends a little bit on what the Barbarian is wearing, but often the Barbarian won't have room anymore for the Executioner. So if the Barbarian is not running Executioner, it's preferable if you run the Executioner as the zMonk. If you didn't want to run Executioner or your Barb's already running it so you don't need to, Flying Dragon is a preferable use there. So your chance to double your attack speed when attacking. So that gives you a bunch more heals because you're healing based on Epiphany with every hit. So attack speed gives you heals. Keep that in mind. Executioner or Flying Dragon. Armor slot, as I mentioned, Nemesis or Spirit Guards is generally what I recommend. And jewelry slot, you can have a Flavor of Time there. You can have an immunity amulet such as Star of Azkaranth, which is the fire immunity, or something like Countess Julia's cameo, which is all arcane damage prevented. So fire and arcane are what the two I would recommend. If you are instead wearing something like a Hellfire amulet for the extra passive, such as Unity can be a good extra buff for the group, then you could put the Flavor of Time in the cube. Now, keeping in mind the Season 20 buff, there's a few other play arounds you can do with your cube as well. Maybe you don't feel you need Spirit Guards, you're surviving fine without them. Then you could be wearing the Nemesis and use an extra weapon slot, right? So you could run Executioner and Flying Dragon, for example, as one example. Or similarly, you want to keep your Spirit Guards, but you don't feel like you need that immunity amulet. Again, you could run two weapons there. You could have your Executioner and a Flying Dragon in your cube. So those kinds of things are fine. Basically up to you what you do with that in Season 20. So that's most of the gear. I will point out here that I do not have any augments on this. I normally wouldn't augment my support monk in a season. So that's why this has no augments, because it's pretty much my Season 19 monk I've pulled over and just made some variations to. But if you're looking to augment, you have some options. So I just wanted to talk about those. I typically recommend below about 2000 Paragon that you would augment with Vitality for that extra life, because you don't have as much from Paragon as yet. However, once you've got plenty of Paragon and you're moving beyond that, you're above 2000 Paragon, so you've got a lot of points into Vitality from your Paragon, then I would typically recommend instead augmenting with Intelligence Gems, which gives you a little bit of all resistance for everyone you're augmenting. So they're your options, Vitality or Intelligence, but to me it depends a bit on your Paragon. Low Paragon, consider going for the Vitality. High Paragon, go for the Intelligence. So that's most of the gear and a few options for the gear. Now, gems. So the gems there aren't really any options for in terms of normal gems. So that's cooldown in the helm, you need it. Resist all in the armor pieces, and life per hit in the weapon. There's not really any better option for those. Legendary gems, though, there is options. And I'm going to suggest this depends a little bit on your cooldown. You really want to keep Sank up, obviously, but also Epiphany up full time. So really you want to have enough cooldown such that if you hit Epiphany, by the time it cools down, you can hit Epiphany again. Now pretty much to do that on this build, you need to get to 75.24% cooldown, which is effectively perfect cooldown. Now, that means you need perfect rolls everywhere, which I do have on this build, right? 8% on my gloves, 10% on my weapon, 8% on my shield, etc, etc. If you do not have perfect cooldown, your legendary gems have to change from what I'm wearing. So I am wearing an esoteric alteration. I really prefer to do it. I find the survivability really helps. But if you do not have that 75.24% cooldown, run a Gogok of Swiftness. So replace that esoteric with a Gogok of Swiftness. That's going to give you extra cooldown with your attacks, and then you'll have plenty of cooldown to keep your Sanctuary up and your Epiphany up. So that's your option there. Your other two gems aren't optional, really. So Gem of Efficacious Toxin. This is a damage boost and a survivability boost for your team. You need it, please run it. You only need it though at rank 25. Anything above 25 doesn't help you, so just run it at 25. All good. And Ice Blink. So this is a damage buff for your damage dealers. It gives extra critical hit chance. It's also applying a chill, just so you're aware. But again, you don't need it above rank 25, so level it to 25 and let it sit there. That's great. So compulsory legendary gems, in my opinion, Ice Blink and Toxin. Optional for the other slot is Esoteric Alteration if you have enough cooldown, which I'm suggesting for this version of the build is 75.24%. And if you do not have that, run Gogok of Swiftness because cooldown is more important there. So that will give you the extra cooldown. Having a look at the Paragon. So importantly, nowhere on my gear and nowhere in my Paragon is any area damage. Area damage causes extra calculations, which causes lag. So please do not run area damage if you are a support at all. And it's even debatable now if you're a DPS. But for now, supports do not run area damage. We do not want those extra calculations, which can cause lag. You do want all points in the rest though. So resource cost reduction helps you. And keep in mind, it's also giving you some extra survivability. Life per hit is helpful, and gold, well, why not? It's not harming anything. Defense, life, armor, resist, or life regen. If I had to pick those in order for my support monk, I would put points into resist all first, then percent life, then life regen, and then armor at the end. My personal preference. In offense, I definitely want cooldown first, most critical, and then attack speed. Attack speed is improving my heals. And then you can do later critical hit damage, critical hit chance. They're not really helping you, but again, they're not causing any harm, so it's fine to have the points in there. Over in core, you want all points in max spirit. Points in movement speed up to getting 25% overall. So I've got 15% assigned here, and I did have a 10% assigned on my amulet because I had that flavor of time. So if you don't have any movement speed on your gear, you want this maxed out to 25%. But keep in mind, if you've got some on your gear, you can reduce this a little bit. And then the rest of my points into vitality. I haven't added my non-season ones here, so that's just from my seasonal Paragon. Okay, taking a look at the skill screen now. So running Crippling Wave Tsunami. This is really important that you're running a cold skill to be able to proc your Ice Blink. And Crippling Wave Tsunami is really the go-to skill for that. Breath of Heaven Zephyr, not too critical this season, not considered as critical. So when we swap something later, it will be this swapping out. But it is a nice heal, and it is a nice little movement bonus as well. So it is helpful, just not critical. But keep in mind, it's got a very small radius to it. So allies within 12 yards. So you really need to be right on top of your DPS for this to really benefit them as well. Keep that in mind both in the pack, particularly for the heal, and when moving for the little speed boost. Inner Sank, Temple of Protection. This is really essential for any zMonk build. Gives a lot of protection. Now, Temple of Protection is about avoiding control impairing effects. Technically, if everyone has Ignore Pain from the Barb, there should be anyway, but we just want to have this as effectively a backup to that. IP can drop sometimes, so recommended Temple of Protection there. Epiphany Soothing Mist, this is where a bunch of your heals are coming from. So Soothing Mist is what causes a heal, and the heal amount is increased by 4% of your health globe healing bonus. So that's one of the places where health globe healing bonus on all your secondaries comes really important. Serenity Tranquility, this is a nice little shield that everyone gets, and this has a much better radius, right? 45 yards. So that's why one of the reasons if you're dropping something, you know, drop the Breath of Heaven. Serenity is really also good if people are wearing squirts. So it's really giving them an immunity and a shield. As well as the base damage, it's increased by 40% of your health globe bonus. So again, health globes on your secondaries are essential to make the shields from Serenity better. Finally, Mantra of Healing, Time of Need. So Mantra of Healing is great. Again, you get a shield. We like shields. Absorb amount is increased by 15% of your health globe healing bonus. Have I mentioned health globes are good? I think I have, but health globes are good. So that's great. And the passive is increased by your life per second. So if you can have a couple pieces of life per second, that's great, but not as important as your health globe healing bonus. Time of Need is reducing damage when below 50% life. So that's just a handy bonus. We'll make mention that last season, or 2.6.7, a lot of people were running Heavenly Body, and that was to run with a lot of the shields that were based on maximum life, or at least the wizards were. Probably not as essential anymore. So I'm recommending Time of Need, but if you want, Heavenly Body is an option as well. So that's maximum life for everybody when it's active. Passive skills and options. So I'm going to go through the essentials first, which in my opinion is Resolve. So that's a survivability bonus for your whole team. So damage you deal. And while you are a support DPS, you're not really doing DPS. You're also called a 0 DPS. You are actually doing tiny amounts of damage. Everything you're hitting with Crippling Wave is reducing the damage it puts out. So that's really handy for everyone to survive. Beacon of Atar, cooldown. Cooldown is really handy. Take the cooldown, Beacon of Atar. And in my opinion, near-death experience is a great thing. While hopefully you won't be dying, it's always good to get a second chance. So I recommend running near-death experience there. Now, where there's options coming into it, so when you're playing this, you should be spamming your mantra. Generally, we just spam our mantra, so spam Mantra of Healing because that resets the shield. I've put here Seize the Initiative, and that's because really the mantra here is the only thing costing spirit. Since it's the only thing costing spirit, and I also have a bunch of resource cost reduction in my build, I have actually found that I don't need Chant of Resonance so much. But Chant of Resonance is the other option. If you run this and you're having spirit issues, run Chant of Resonance. That's your other option there. But if you find your spirit is fine, grab Seize the Initiative. It gives you extra attack speed, and extra attack speed is extra heals for everyone. So we like that. So that's what I would recommend running there. Your other option is Unity. So Unity is a great little 5% damage boost for your team. But yeah, they're the options there for that last slot. But I would say the critical ones, Resolve, Beacon of Atar, and Near-Death Experience. Okay, so that's the base build. Now I'm going to go over some of the Exploding Palm options, which are somewhat popular at the moment. Okay, so I've got two versions of Exploding Palm to show. One is effectively dropping out Borns, which is the one I've just put on, and the other one will be dropping out Captain Crimson's for Exploding Palm. If I want Exploding Palm, now Exploding Palm is a bleed, and it's also a damage buff. I do find it causes a little bit of extra lag, so you need to be aware of that, but it is what it is, right? So extra bleed, making bleed on your weapons less critical technically, and extra damage for the team. What I'm losing for it, well, I've lost Breath of Heaven Zephyr is the key thing. So in this version where I've lost Borns, which means I've lost that little bit of extra cooldown from Borns, what that means is that although I love my Esoteric, I can no longer wear Esoteric because I won't have enough cooldown to keep up Epiphany. So take out the Esoteric, don't want that anymore. Cooldown is essential, and throw in the Gogok of Swiftness. So lost Breath of Heaven Zephyr and lost my Esoteric, but running Gogok. Okay, so they're the key things there. And then obviously because I've lost Borns, I've also lost my Storm Shield, and I've picked up Istvan. So they're really great for attack speed. which again is going to give you more healing and some armor as well. You can see here I've rolled these with bleed. I'm showing you bleed versions of these. Because you've got EP, it's less important, but it would still be recommended that you try and get yourself some weapons or shields with the bleed on it. Again, no CC on the secondary, just to try and avoid affecting anything else. I do have a little bit less cooldown here on this sword. I've only got the 8%, but I should be okay still because I've got that Gogok in there. So overall on this version of the build right now, I'm running at 70% cooldown. So it's still pretty high, but I'm just not going to keep Epiphany up full time without that Gogok. So do run Gogoks. And you'll note here, I'm no longer wearing illusories. That's the other thing I've lost, but that's okay. So I've gone and I've thrown them in the cube. I've still got my Executioner in the cube, but I've also picked up the illusories there. But that also means I lost something else. I also lost my Spirit Guards. Yeah, all up to you. So to gain Exploding Palm while keeping Captain Crimson's, I've lost my Spirit Guards as well. Keep that in mind. Which leads me to, if I was wanting to run EP, I personally, although I'm going to lose my nice buff from the resource cost reduction of Captain Crimson's, I'd personally probably use a version that drops Captain Crimson's and keeps the Borns, because I think I lose less. Okay, quick look at the skill screen changes. So all I've done is I've taken out Breath of Heaven Zephyr and I put in Exploding Palm, the Flesh is Weak. Everything else has stayed the same. So Crippling Wave Tsunami, Serenity, Tranquility, Inner Sanct, Temple of Protection, Epiphany, Soothing Mist, Exploding Palm, the Flesh is Weak, Mantra of Healing, Time of Need, and everything else, passives as well, stayed the same. CC Initiative, Resolve, Beacon of Atar, and Near Death Experience. Let's have a look at the other version, which is losing Captain Crimson's and picking up Borns again. Okay, running the other version now, which means I've lost my Captain Crimson's buff, so I've lost the damage reduction based on my resource cost reduction, but I've gained back Borns, and I feel like I've lost less other things. So, for example, on this version, I get to keep my Spirit Guards, so that's a 60% damage reduction there that I've kept, so I think that's pretty solid. And my Nemesis, therefore, are back in my cube there. So you can see my Nemesis are back in my cube. And I've got my Spirit Guards. I've also kept my Storm Shield, which is handy for survivability. And since I'm back to my Born's weapon, I do have the bleed on my Born's weapon. Again, if you're running the Exploding Palm version of the build, Exploding Palm, the Flesh is Weak. It is less important to have bleed because Exploding Palm is causing a bleed, but I would still recommend it because you might be switching between builds, so it's worth having a weapon that kind of covers all scenarios. Again, though, I have lost my Esoteric, so I've lost my Esoteric. I don't have the cooldown anymore, so my cooldown on this version is what I'm running right now is 69%, so I need that Gogok of Swiftness in there to make sure I keep my Epiphany up full time to keep those heals and survivability going. But that's really the stuff I've lost if I drop Captain Crimson. So I've lost the Esoteric, and I've lost a little buff from having Captain Crimson's, reducing my damage taken. You can see there I still had some cooldown on Epiphany when I came out of that. So that's the other version that you may see people running is Exploding Palm. It does give more damage because that 15% damage buff there does cause a little bit of extra lag, I find, but really it's up to the teams what's running. Key things are as much cooldown as possible on all the builds. Running the first build I showed my preference, I'm running at 75.24. These other builds I'm running at 69 to 70% cooldown reduction. As much globes as possible. You want to look for at least, 200,000 health globe bonus, I would say. So 200,000 is what you're really aiming for. More is always better though, so keep that in mind. More is better. Yeah. Taking another quick look at the skill screen, it's exactly the same as the other EP version. So Crippling Wave Tsunami, Serenity, Tranquility, Inner Sanct, Temple of Protection, Epiphany, Soothing Mist, Exploding Palm, the Flesh is Weak, and this is instead of what you've lost is Breath of Heaven Zephyr, Mantra of Healing, Time of Need. With the passives, as I say, I haven't changed them. CC Initiative, Resolve, Beacon of Atar, Near Death Experience. Variations to those passives are just as I said in the first build. There we go. That's what I'm recommending for your support zMonks for patch 2.6.8 for the moment, running with generally a Ground Stomp Barbarian and either a Trash Killer for Legacy of Dreams, Nova Necromancer, or Mundunugu's Spirit Barrage Witch Doctor. Have fun out there, see you in Sanctuary, and GG!